Hey everybody, this is Tracy here to review episode 3 of Insecure, and this episode was titled Racist as Fuck. So before we get started, just want to say I hope everyone had a beautiful weekend. I know we did here. The weather was just fantastic, and on Saturday, I attended Beats by the Bay, which is a local festival put on by one of our radio stations. So I had the chance to groove with Monica, Fat Joe, and my all-time favorite Frankie Beverly and Mays. And so it was just a great night. Great chance to bond with my youngest daughter Shantae, who's 23 years old. So it was great. Hope you enjoyed your weekend. So let's get started. So, in this episode, we learned a little more about Lawrence. So, I'm going to stop calling him Mr. No Potential because Lawrence does have potential. And I guess he lost his job and he's currently on unemployment. And he does have money in the bank. So, I know in the last episode, I was questioning how was he buying all that stuff at the Rite Aid. And, all he does is sit on that couch. But he does have money in the bank. And there was a scene where he was actually at the bank going to cash his unemployment check, and the teller, who he must know because I think he was up next for another teller, but he told the person behind him that they could go, and so that person went around, and then he ended up at this other teller, and she was, kind of flirting with him, and she asked him, where he was coming from or something like that, and he said that he had a job interview, and so she said, oh, so this is going to be your last check, kind of encourage him, saying like you got the job, and then I think he told her that he didn't get the job. And we also learned that Lawrence has a headhunter, which is a person that helps professionals get jobs. So he must be, I never did catch what exactly it is that he does for a living, but it must be a pretty good job that, he can afford to pay this person. And so what she was suggesting to him was that he take an entry level position and work his way back up into a company to the level where he wants to be. But Lawrence doesn't want to do that. And even though she tells him that, there's a lot of stiff competition out there and there just aren't enough jobs for the number of people looking for jobs, he still, he wants to keep trying for whatever position level that he's looking for. And so we move on to Issa, and Issa, she's on her job with her crazy coworkers, and they're planning the trip where they're going to take the kids to the beach to do the community service cleanup project. And she's on her way to the break room, and she overhears them talking about her and like making fun of the trip, saying, do the bus even go to the beach and that type of thing. And so she stands there for a little while, just to get a gist of what's going on and who all is talking. And then she goes into the break room, and of course everybody's like, oh, Issa, how you doing? How's the planning going? And so she, lets them know that she overheard what they were saying. And so everyone kind of makes a quick exit out of the break room, and her teammate, who I still cannot catch what this girl's name is, but so the teammate is kind of apologizing, and she mentioned something about emails, and then Issa was like, okay, wait a minute, you guys have an email chain about the project, and I'm not on the email chain. And the more the coworker talked, the more she, let Issa know that they were talking about her behind her back. And so they're finally on their way to the trip and on their way to the beach, I'm sorry. And the kids, once again, it's showtime at the Apollo. Def Comedy Jam rolled all together, and the kids are just being really inappropriate again. And two of the co-workers, they're like talking, and Issa turns around and she catches them. So then they start texting each other, and they're laughing, as they're reading each other's texts. And as childish as it is, I've done that where I've been out with a group of people, and we're like at the like at a table at dinner or something, and then there's like me and my closest friend, we're sitting there texting each other about stuff that's going on at the table. So yeah, um, no age difference on that. Childish is as childish does. So anyway, they Issa, she's kind of, I guess she's thinking that they're talking about the kids. So she gets up and she addresses the kids, and she's like trying to talk and signal like, you guys got to behave and you don't want to give the wrong impression. And so the kids are like really quiet and they're looking at her. And then when she goes to sit down, they start cracking jokes again. And so, they're laughing and carrying on. So she realizes it's hopeless. And so they make it to the beach, and the kids, they're running out, and there was this one girl, I think she was a Hispanic girl, and she had this huge raft, and I think she did get in the water, and she was in the raft, but for the most part, black kids don't swim, they don't do water well, so they were like, I think they would get like ankle deep, not even knee deep. They would let the water get to their ankles, but they weren't going any further than that. And so the kids really enjoyed the outing and the project that they worked on. And the co-workers were really surprised, that Issa was right and it was a successful project. But there was a moment where the white guy that's on the team, he did come over to Issa, and he was like, "Why don't they get in the water?" And Issa said, "Because of slavery." And the guy kind of just looked at her and walked away, and I thought that was funny. Oh, and one more thing about Issa that I said in a previous video, I was saying how, I loved how she goes in the bathroom and she's looking in the mirror, and she's doing these raps, to kind of motivate and encourage herself. But what I realized in episode 3 is that those aren't really live shots. That's really stuff that's going on in her head, that she's actually imagining that she's in the bathroom doing this rap, talking about whatever her problems were. Or it may just be a combination. Sometimes she really is in the bathroom, and then other times she's in situations where she wish she was in the bathroom so she could say what she really wants to say to the people around her. And I think that was pretty much. Oh, and then there was with Issa and Lawrence, where she came home and Lawrence had cooked dinner, and he had set the table and he wanted to sit down, and have a nice dinner together. And that was just like such a comparison of flipping the switch, where now the guy is acting like the girl and the girl is acting like the man, role reversals. And so she grabs her plate and she goes and plops down on the sofa, and he's just like, "What are you doing? Why are you over there eating on the sofa? You're going to mess up the sofa." And I was just like, oh my God. And so he goes over to the sofa, and then she's like, "What are you complaining about? Blah, blah, blah." And so she wastes her food, dumps some of her food on the sofa, and he comes running with the wet towel or something. He's trying to clean it up. And so she's having these flashbacks of when they first moved into the apartment and they bought that sofa, and just the memories. And then later on in the show, we see them where they take the sofa out to the curb. And remember the guy from the other episode that was, trying to give him advice? I think he's the downstairs neighbor. And so he comes up and, he makes some wisecrack about them on this sofa, and they start laughing and everything. So they're kind of like working their way back together and getting back to where they want to be. So we're going to give Lawrence a little more time to get his act together. And then with Molly, so Molly has a new coworker, and she is a black girl, with the braids in her hair and talking slang and everything. And so Molly, she's kind of embarrassed by the girl. And there was a scene where the girl and one of the co-workers were talking, and she was just being a really hood rat in this scene. And so Molly calls her in and she tries to talk to her and tell her, "You can't be acting like that in the office." And the girl was like, "I was acting like this in the interview when they hired me, and I'll keep acting like this. I'm not, changing myself." So not sure how that's going to play out, but my guess is going to be that Molly and this girl aren't going to get along, and she may even cost Molly her job. Like, that would be more exciting than Molly getting the girl fired. But anyway, that's my thought on that. And then Molly and the guy from the club, so they've been dating and they're really, all goo goo gaga eyed. And they go to a party that one of Molly's friends is hosting. And it was sort of like a scene out of the movie Love Jones. Remember when they were all at the house and they were talking and chatting and, just being real about dating. And so during the course of this conversation, the guy, he's fitting in with the friends and he's, really enjoying himself and letting, showing Molly a lot of affection and letting them know, that he really likes Molly. And then the conversation turns to education, and he tells them that he doesn't have a college degree. And it was just like you could hear them slam the brakes. And Molly decided at that moment, she couldn't be with him, not because he doesn't have an education, but I think she's embarrassed and doesn't want her, like she sees it as a step down to be dating somebody who doesn't have a college degree. And so slowly as the episode goes along, she kind of pulls away from him. And then she gets a letter in the mail. If you recall, I think it was episode 1, where she was saying that she was on the waiting list, or it might have been the second episode. She was on the waiting list for this dating site. So we see her get a letter saying that she is off the waiting list and she's now been accepted to this website. So she's decided to get rid of the guy from the club, even though she really liked him, and then try to pursue, the guys that are on this website. And so I thought that was kind of sad because he seemed to have really liked her, and she was like, well, I don't want to get serious, and we can just be friends. And he pretty much knew, she was dumping him because of it. He wasn't good enough for her friends. So hopefully Miss Molly will come to her senses later on and realize that that was not a good move. And I think that was pretty much all that happened on the show. At least that's all I can remember. So that's it. I believe that was all that was in this episode. If I missed something, go ahead and mention it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the video. And until next time, peace and love. Take care. Bye bye.